Hey you guys, what's up? I'm Ashley from heavenathome.org, and this is the Heaven at Home podcast, where my goal is to encourage you in your personal growth journey while being open, honest, and owning my story. We have faith-based conversations and tackle a bunch of different tough topics. Check out the description to follow me and learn more. Remember, you are fully known and deeply loved. Let's do this. You guys. Y'all, I just want to take this second to remind us all that God is real. God is really, 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 really real. I don't know who's on the other end of this. I don't know what you believe or you don't believe, but I am 100% convinced God is real. And I hope you have the audacity to seek him out, because I believe you will find him. He is amazing. And as a 20, oh my God, I almost forgot how old I am. 28? Oh, Jesus. As a 28-year-old believer and lover of Jesus, who has been raised in the church all her life, who knows like pretty much all the, baby Bible stories and all that stuff. I will never, ever, ever, ever outgrow my need for Jesus. I attended this Gen Z event for New Year's Eve. And wow, oh my gosh, it was an amazing, amazing experience. But there was this speaker who was talking about a physical trauma that he went through and experienced a while back. And his story was crazy. Yeah, I have like so many questions about the stuff that he went through. But there was a point where he was talking about his story and how he's literally still in pain from it. Like he's an amputee. And he was just sharing the process of like, seeing Jesus in the middle of that whole thing, seeing his sacrifice, seeing his willingness to surrender, the process of like forgiveness and coming to a place of compassion with the person who hurt him, and also just the daily struggle of like actively being in pain because of the damage that was done. So he was sharing his story, right? And when I tell you I have questions, because it's almost like he felt led to the circumstances that he experienced. Like I have so many questions for God, but he was going into detail about like his process and his journey and stuff. And when I tell you, like he started declaring with his mouth, I forgive this person, I forgive this person. And I was like fully tuned in to his story. Like he's like a good mix of like funny, but informational and like spiritual and like it's just really cool. It was a really cool person. So I was like fully engaged. And at the point where he mentions the other person by name, not their first and not last name, but just their first name, it was such a full circle moment for me. Like I felt like a slap in the face of conviction. I don't even know how to like fully describe everything because I'm very attentive to my heart. I'm very attentive to stewarding my heart and dealing with painful situations in healthy ways for the most part. I give myself grace. I make mistakes. For the most part, I'm like very finely tuned into myself. And the level of conviction I felt just to forgive again, but also to forgive to the extent that the speaker was able to, it was just such a challenge for me. Some people, they look in on my situation, they're like, wow, I could never do that. And they almost have like an admiration for me But I'm like, no, like, I feel like I have like so much more to do, so much more to grow. Um, and like I said, this was a Gen Z event. So this is like tailored to like maybe middle school, high school, like young people. And I'm basically ancient at this point. And they did the altar call. No one immediately went up. But when I tell you, I was the first person at that altar, I was literally the first person, and I did not care. Like, I will take every opportunity to forgive if I need to. I will take every opportunity to bow down if I need to submit if I need to. Um, and yeah, like the conviction for even the prayer I prayed that day was really, it was a really significant moment for me. And yeah, I'll never outgrow that. I will never, ever, ever outgrow my need for Jesus. And even when I see myself growing in any capacity, as a mother, as a teacher, as a friend, as a worship leader, as a blogger, podcaster, even in a context where I might see myself like speaking to people, I will never outgrow my need for Jesus, ever. And if I need to bow down, I will bow down. If I need to submit, I will submit. If I need to cry, I'll cry. I don't think I'm ever going to get to a point where I'm just like, oh, I don't need prayer. Like, nah, I'll be the first one. I will be the first one. And I'm actually thinking back on this story. I want to say it was maybe like 2017, 2018, where I was at this youth event and I was helping out with worship at the time. And I remember just this moment before the service, and I was like, God, I don't want to perform. I don't want to do this just to do it. Like, I am desperate for you. Like, I need you. I want you. I desire you. And I need you to show up. Like, and I was at a very low place in that time frame. I was still dealing with like homesickness and what I recognize now back then was like depression a bit. And just like growing into my identity as a daughter. And yeah, and to see what God is able to do in really low and trying moments is astounding to me. I remember talking to my friend, my high school friend in Florida a couple of years ago, and I was dealing with my life. I think that's a good way to put it. Dealing with my life and foreseeing all these things, anticipating all these things. And there was one context, or actually, I think I told this to a couple people, where I was like, I literally wouldn't be able to handle this if that happened. I don't think I'd be able to handle this healthy. I don't think I'd be able to handle this honorably. And it wasn't me being pessimistic or being negative or anything like that. I think it was a realistic assumption, prediction, just out of consideration of like who I am, my level of attachment in general. I feel like my ability to kind of anticipate situations is what has helped me. So anyway, so a couple years ago, I was like, I don't think I'd be able to handle this. Like, that's a lot of loss to deal with. There's a lot of identity issues attached to that whole thing. So it was a lot to process. And a couple years later, obviously the present, I have this like really long conversation with her. I'm like kind of catching her up on my life at this point. And I just let her know about something new. And she literally, I won't forget this because it's kind of crazy. She was literally like, wow, I know that God is real. She's like, God is so real because 2 years ago, everything you're doing, everything you're saying, it's not like lining up with who you were back then. And the fact that God was able to bring you to this point where you're able to deal with it, face it, reconcile it, and have this opinion, have this outlook, have this perspective as a mom, attitude as a mom is like a really big thing. And it was shocking to me because I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Like it's not very often where I compare myself to myself. I just always kind of, I think for the most part, I'm kind of present and just like kind of analyzing where I am and tailoring my actions accordingly. And so to kind of look back on it through her eyes, and I was like, wow, you know, God is real. He really is doing something. Even if I can't see it for myself, even if it doesn't feel like it, he's doing something. And I think that's really cool. And so this is the point of this whole story, I guess. I want you to think about like your lowest moments, if you've ever experienced something like drastic, something crushing. If you've ever been in a moment where you're in the pit of your life, when you're at rock bottom, when you're in your greatest pain. One of the things that's been really hard for me to, I want to say like tolerate. I think tolerate is a good word. Like tolerate physically, emotionally, mentally, is being in situations that used to feel familiar that I now feel estranged in. So like people that I used to see, an environment I used to be in, a world I used to know that is now very estranged. In situations like that, I really wrestle. And I was just thinking about different moments in my life. One moment was in my daughter's bedroom in the dark, and just literally praying for God to heal my heart. I remember having this moment where I had like the last remaining symbol of like all my hopes and dreams, and I, went through this process of literally and symbolically like kind of giving that to God. And I was just thinking about like how in those spaces you have a super unique opportunity to choose to worship anyway. And I was listening to this sermon by Bill Johnson. He literally gives this sermon relatively close to his wife's passing. And I want to share the title with you guys. It's called Breaking the Bread of My Soul, in case you guys want to look it up on YouTube. It is super powerful, seeing like his raw emotions and seeing his resilient mindset to still believe that God is good in the middle of that. But let me see if I can quote him closely. So he's like saying like in eternity, we'll have an opportunity to worship. We'll have an opportunity to give praise and to ascribe him holiness and worthiness and all that stuff. And it's only in the place of grief and heartache that you have the opportunity to give him a type of worship that only exists on this side of heaven. And that's because in heaven there's no pain, there's no hardship, there's no grief, there's no loss, there's no heartbreak, there's no illness. And just kind of talking about the unexpected treasure in that moment. It was just like so profound to me, like to choose to worship God anyway and give praise anyway and obey anyway, to learn and lean in when you feel like backing down, or to fight when you want to flee, to love when you want to leave, like all that stuff. I think on my own, I've always had that conviction but never put words to it. Like I love those moments where I'm just like, I have this sensation about myself, but I don't know how to express it in words. And then when I find it in words, I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. But literally in my lowest moments, even just as a mechanism to get through it and endure it, in those moments of great pain, I literally consider it as an offering to God, as my best sacrifice that I can give. And I remember maybe like early fall this year, God had been dealing with me and speaking to me and preparing me. There was one prayer that I wrote in such great detail, and I was surprised that part of me was in anticipation of everything that would happen. I thought that was really cool. But I remember having this moment with God in that season, and I was just talking about a normal, everyday thing, something people wouldn't really think twice about, having a meeting, getting lunch, stuff like that. And it was, I was literally on the floor crying about this. And I guess the context of the whole thing is lacking, but just trying to paint a picture without giving too much. But there's literally a moment in my prayer where I was like, God, even if this is stretching my boundaries, even if this is testing me in the wrong way, or even if this is something that you're not necessarily asking me to do, I want to honor you with it. I want to do my best knowing what I know. I want to be as receptive to growth as possible. And my goal is to be able to do this one day without being in so much pain. And I think there's very key moments, like, I don't know how to explain it, but to kind of wrap your mind around having an eternal perspective and having a relational perspective with God when you're going through low stuff. I think there's something about that that's so beautiful. And I was thinking about that passage regarding like the alabaster box. And how I'm also reading a book on this. It's called Reset by Jeremy Riddle. But just talking about the uniqueness of worship and offering in that moment, that was almost repulsive to the people who were observing. People looked down on that person. People judged that person. People questioned that person even showing up. And Jesus was literally like, wow, that is so precious and beautiful to me. Like, that is the most beautiful treasure. And I just want to challenge you, if you're going through a hard season in your life, to hold those moments very dearly, to seek God in that, to seek his comfort in that. I had a conversation with a friend earlier today, and we were just talking about like being able to heal and the process of that, moving on, moving forward, having vision for what's next. And one thing I told her is that I don't think healing ever completely stops. There are some moments where I have to endure pain and forgive about as often, moment by moment. There's other days where something just pops up. And then there's other days where I'm in a completely unique situation, a completely unique conflict. and I'm still wrestling in the healing process. And even then, like it literally takes me back to that moment. I'm like, okay, God, it's just you and I. It's just you and I. And I've been thinking about that. Ooh, this is getting longer than I expected. I'm sorry, y'all. Congrats to you guys if y'all are sticking with me. I was thinking about how important it is to have vision, because vision gives you hope, vision gives you strength, vision empowers you, especially when you know that something is going to end at some point. There's somewhere to go. There's something that comes next. That kind of ties into the concept of like having an eternal perspective. Like I kind of think about that very often. Like if Jesus was to come now, what would the quality of my heart be? What would my heart posture be? What would he say about our relationship? Would he say that he knew me? Would he say that he really knew me? And that's just a conviction that I have. But just having the vision for heaven, having a vision for eternity. I imagine if and when I get to a point where I'm, old and wrinkly and all that stuff, I imagine passing away is going to be an interesting, maybe scary experience. But to know that there's something that comes after, like at this stage, at my age, it gives me a level of comfort. I remember my grandmother having a dream at one point, because she was asking her friend at the time. She was like, I wonder what it would feel like to die. I wonder what it would be like. And she had this dream where she was sitting on a bench. She was sharing Jesus with a stranger that sat next to her. And then all of a sudden, the dream shifts and she's in a balloon and she feels complete peace. And I think about that and I'm like, wow, that's so beautiful. I think it's really caring and compassionate to see God reveal himself in that way to her. I wouldn't say it's a coincidence. I wouldn't say it's her subconscious. I would say that that's God. I couldn't manufacture a dream if I tried. I really couldn't. But the gift that he gave her in that moment was vision, a clear vision of what it would feel like. Exactly her question, like peace. And I've been navigating, just hearing God for myself, taking things step by step. And my sister knows this, my mom knows this, my cousin knows this. I'm very stubborn. I hold on to the word of God very dearly, especially what he tells me directly. I hold that conviction. And I have been thinking about this new promise I'm going to say, this new vision that I have. And it's something that I haven't had in years. Like ever since, I can point all the way back to one singular moment where my vision was completely taken away. My vision for the future, my vision as a wife, as a mom, as a worship leader, as a person, all of it was just one black hole of like unanswered questions. Vision was like the first thing to go. And God's been dealing with me. And just within the concept of being able to envision the future at all, I've noticed two things. One is peace. I don't feel like I have to perform as much. I don't feel like I have to pretend to be further along. I feel relief and a weight off in that way. Second thing is I feel like empowered to let the past be the past, like close that door. I remember having a moment, it was around maybe a little bit after Christmas, And I was like, man, I'm like so irrelevant. Like, I am so inconsequential to this person that I hold so dearly. And, you know, my divorce is disgusting. I don't like divorce, but it's such a weird thing. And anyway, so I was like wrestling with the feeling. I was like, man, like I wish I just could have gotten like a heads up, like, hey, I'm around thinking of you, or, you know, just something like that. And immediately, for the first time ever, I think, immediately after, I was like, the past is in the past. Let's leave that there. There's something new. I've never really been able to put that strategy into practice. It's something that I know, like, consciously, like, people know that you have to move forward, you have to move on, you have to let go. You can know all those things and not know how to do it. But I feel like the thing that empowered me and taught me how is the fact that I was able to have vision for what comes next. And God's been dealing with me in a lot of different areas regarding that whole thing. And especially in relation to what I'm about to tell you guys, I hold those two things very dearly, because those are two tools in my toolbox that I didn't have before. But so I have this promise. I have this promise of relief. I have this promise of a new thing. I have this promise of, I don't know how to explain that, like increase and outpouring, and people not knowing me by my pain, and not being limited by my surroundings in any context. Just like the sky is the limit completely. And I have this promise that I think is from God, and I'm trying to steward it well, not take it for granted. I write everything down. I keep record. I try to judge prophecy and test it. And, you know, I have my own history with God with that whole thing. But even getting to a place now, I'm at a new vulnerable spot where I'm like, okay, this is the first time I ever even remotely feel permission to consider this. Am I willing to sacrifice it again? And part of me is preparing my heart posture for that also. And I'm thinking about that story of Abraham and Isaac, and how God challenges their faith and lets them know, like, hey, I have all these plans for you. Like, you don't see it now, but your descendants are going to be countless. And it's all going to happen through Isaac, your son. This is the way that it's going to happen. This is the one way that you're going to experience everything that I've promised. And there's this story is mind-boggling. If you've never heard it before, maybe I'll leave the description of like the details in the description. Did I just repeat that? Yeah, I'll leave the details in the description. That's what I meant to say. Sorry. Okay, so going through that whole thing, God tells Abraham to sacrifice his son. And essentially what it does is he asks him to sacrifice a promise, something that he treasured, something that he believed for, something that he hoped for, just to see if it was something he was willing to let go. And kind of going through my situation, that's one thing I remember writing notes about this, and this was something I've said for years. With every promise, there's always a test. Do you want the promise more, or do you want the person more? Do you want the promise, or do you want the person? And in every situation, for the most part, I don't know if this is like a trauma response or like an orphan spirit or what, but like, or just in general preparing for the worst. But even still, you know, like spiritual practice, I'm just like, am I prepared to sacrifice again? Am I prepared to obey again? Especially with the hope of getting something different. Bill Johnson brings like such a beautiful way of describing worship in this way. Like, to get to a place where you're giving an offering that will cost you and giving God a sacrifice that you'll never have the chance to give him again. Getting a chance to worship in like really painful moments, and the different ways that like worship could be demonstrated. I remember literally grieving sometimes, like crying one moment and dancing the next. And Bill Johnson described like joy and loss, celebration and pain, and giving up the right to understand. I think there are multiple ways to worship when you're in your most painful place. But that is the only place in your life. And that moment is the only moment you have to give God what you hold most dear, to give God what you treasure the most, to ascribe him glory and to say that he's good in circumstances that are not so good. It's just a testament to the revelation and the intimacy and the general knowledge of God and who he is. And so I just wanted that to be an encouragement for you, whoever you are. If you're listening and you're in a lot of pain and you're grieving and you're dealing with very difficult nights seem to be the hardest. If you find yourself crying in the middle of the day for no reason, if you're going through a tough situation at home or going through loss or whatever it is, just want to encourage you to invite God into that moment and to offer him the best of what you have, even if you feel like it's not much. And so I just wanted to share that with you guys. God is really, really real, and he's really, really good. And this podcast episode is officially 3 times longer than I intended. So my bad. See you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for listening. Feel free to DM me to send me your feedback. Check out the description below to follow me on social media. This podcast is listener supported. Don't forget to subscribe. Remember, you are fully known and deeply loved. I'll see you in the next one.